For 2,000 years, a terrifying prophecy lay hidden in the desert, a scroll detailing the final war at the end of days. What if I told you the Dead Sea Scrolls describe a 40-year-long battle between the forces of light and a demonic army known as the Sons of Darkness? It's a war plan, written by a mysterious community who believed they were living on the very brink of the apocalypse, a plan that details everything from battlefield strategy to the inscriptions on their trumpets of doom. This isn't just a story of ancient beliefs, it's the story of the War Scroll, an ancient vision of Armageddon that reveals exactly what one group of believers thought the end of time would look like. And their vision is more detailed and more terrifying than you can imagine. In the quiet, desolate landscape of the Judean desert, a secret lay waiting for nearly 2,000 years. It was a secret preserved on brittle parchment, hidden away in remote caves until a young Bedouin shepherd stumbled upon a collection of clay jars in 1947. He couldn't have known it then, but he had just made one of the greatest archaeological finds in history. Inside those jars were the Dead Sea Scrolls, which included the oldest substantial manuscripts of the Hebrew Bible ever found. But they held something more. Among the familiar Psalms and laws was a text so startling and so apocalyptic that it reads less like a prophecy and more like a military manual for the end of the world, a blueprint for the final, cataclysmic war that would decide the fate of all humanity. The keepers of the prophecy. To understand the prophecy, first, we have to understand the prophets. The Dead Sea Scrolls were the treasured library of a mysterious Jewish community that lived near the discovery site, a place we now call Qum. The leading theory is that these people were a devout and ascetic sect who had separated themselves from the mainstream religious authorities in Jerusalem. They retreated into the harsh wilderness for a reason. They believed the world had become corrupted, that the temple was defiled, and that they alone were the true, righteous remnant of Israel. They called themselves the Sons of Light. Living a disciplined, communal life, they dedicated themselves to ritual purity, intense study, and a state of constant readiness. They weren't just waiting for the end of days, they were actively preparing for it. They believed they were living in the final generation, the latter days spoken of by the prophets. Every political tremor, every shift in power, every act of oppression by foreign rulers whom they often called the Kiddim, a name many scholars think pointed to the Roman Empire, was seen as a sign that the final chapter of human history was about to begin. Their library, the Dead Sea Scrolls, was their most precious possession. It held not just their Bibles, but their own rules, hymns, and unique apocalyptic visions. For them, the scrolls weren't just ancient history. They were a guide to the very near future. They interpreted the prophecies of figures like Daniel and Ezekiel not as events of the distant past, but as a coded timeline pointing directly to their own time. They saw themselves as the main characters in the final, divine drama. And the climax of that drama would be a war, unlike any other war for which they had the official rulebook. Unrolling the Apocalypse, the War Scroll, among the hundreds of manuscripts recovered from the caves, one stands out for its chilling and singular purpose. Today, it's known as the War Scroll, or by its full title, The War of the Sons of Light Against the Sons of Darkness. This document's catalogued as 1QM isn't a history book or a collection of prayers. It's a detailed theological and military manual for a future, 40-year-long holy war meant to cleanse the earth and bring in the eternal reign of God. This scroll gives us a startlingly clear window into their apocalyptic worldview. They saw the universe as a grand battlefield, locked in a cosmic struggle between two sides. On one side were the Sons of Light themselves, the righteous remnant of Israel, joined by a heavenly army of angels led by the Archangel Michael, who they also called the Prince of Light. On the other side were the Sons of Darkness. This was a terrifying coalition of all the forces of evil, both human and supernatural. On earth, it included Israel's traditional enemies, along with the mighty Kittimi, their Roman legions. It also included Jews who had violated the covenant, those who had rejected the Qumran community's path and were seen as allies of evil. But their real leader wasn't a human king or general. The ultimate commander of the Sons of Darkness was a powerful, malevolent, supernatural being named Belial. In the scrolls, Belial is the angel of hatred, the Prince of Darkness, whose entire purpose is to bring wickedness and guilt into the world. He's the antithesis of God, and his domain is one of darkness and destruction. So, the war wasn't just a battle for land or political freedom. It was a final, cosmic confrontation to decide the fate of creation itself. It was a war to utterly annihilate Belial and his legions, to remove evil from the world forever, and to prove the ultimate power of the God of Israel. The War Scroll was their playbook for this final conflict. The grand strategy for Armageddon. The War Scroll doesn't just predict a final battle, it meticulously plans it. Piecing together the text, scholars believe the 40-year conflict it describes is divided into distinct phases, with a level of detail that would impress a modern military strategist. The authors left nothing to chance, outlining every maneuver and piece of equipment, believing that victory depended on perfect ritual and military execution. The conflict appears to begin with a shorter, decisive opening campaign. The scroll calls the war against the Kiddim. The scroll describes what seems to be a series of 7 battles. The structure is dramatic, the Sons of Light would win 3, and the army of Belial would win 3, creating a tense deadlock. After 6 bloody stages, the 7th and final battle wouldn't be decided by human strength alone. At the critical moment, the scroll prophesies, "The great hand of God shall overcome Belial and all the angels of his dominion." Divine intervention was their ultimate ace in the hole, the guaranteed key to victory. After this victory, the war would enter a much longer phase. Over the next 33 years, the United Tribes of Israel would systematically campaign to conquer the remaining nations across the globe, re-establishing dominion over the entire world as ordained by God. The level of detail is staggering. It specifies the ages for military servicemen would train at 25 and fight between the ages of 30 and 50. It describes the weapons, swords, spears, and shields, all ritually pure and bearing holy inscriptions like lightning flash of God on the javelins. Even the battle standards had names like the truth of God and the right hand of God. Most importantly, the scroll outlines the use of a series of trumpets, each with a specific purpose. There were trumpets for assembly, ambush, pursuit, and retreat. For example, the trumpets of pursuit would be inscribed with, "God has struck all sons of darkness. He shall not abate his anger until they are annihilated." This wasn't just warfare. It was a sacred ceremony of destruction. The priests weren't just chaplains. They were battlefield commanders, directing the flow of battle with prayers and trumpet blasts. This was a holy crusade where piety was as important as the level of detail is just incredible, a complete vision for the end of the world. It's a glimpse into an ancient mindset that saw the apocalypse not as a far-off myth, but as a real event to be planned for. If you're finding this journey as fascinating as I do, take a moment to subscribe and hit the notification bell. We have so much more to explore together. The leaders of the last days, messiahs and priests, a war this significant needs a leader to match. Yet when we look to the Dead Sea Scrolls for a single heroic commander, we find a complex and, at first, confusing picture. The Qumran community's expectations were very different from many modern ideas of a messiah. In fact, many of their key texts don't anticipate one messianic figure, but two. This idea is often called dual messiah. The community was waiting for a priestly messiah from the line of Aaron and a royal messiah from the line of David. This division of power shows their deep reverence for the priesthood, which they felt had been corrupted in Jerusalem. The Messiah of Aaron, the priestly figure, was seen as the senior of the two. He would be the ultimate spiritual authority, the one to restore true worship, preside over sacred rites, and interpret God's law for the new age. His domain was holiness and righteousness. The Messiah of Israel, the royal figure from the line of David, was the great war. He's described as the branch of David who will lead the armies of the Sons of Light in the final battle. He was the one who would defeat the earthly kings of the Sons of Darkness and establish a kingdom of justice. And yet, even as king and commander, he was often shown to be subordinate to the priestly Messiah. To make things even more interesting, other fragments hint at a different vision. One of the most electrifying texts found at Qumran is a small Aramaic fragment known as 4Q246, or the Son of God text. It speaks of a future ruler who will be great upon the earth. Then, it makes a stunning declaration. Son of God, he will be hailed, and Son of the Most High, they will call him. This figure is prophesied to rise during a time of great trouble and establish an eternal kingdom of peace. Scholars are fiercely divided over who this Son of God is. Is it the royal Messiah, giving him a near-divine status? Or is it, as some argue, a wicked, arrogant foreign king who blasphemously claimed such titles for himself before being struck down? The fragment is too damaged to say for sure, but it proves the title Son of God was being used in a Jewish messianic context before the time of Jesus, adding another layer of mystery to the beliefs at Qumran. Calculating the end prophetic time. So the Qumran community had a plan for the war and an idea of who would lead it. But the most pressing question for them was when would the trumpets sound? They believed the answer was hidden in the scriptures, a divine clock ticking down to zero. Their main source for this was the book of Daniel. Specifically, they were obsessed with the prophecy of the 70 weeks of years. From Daniel 9. This prophecy speaks of a 490-year period for Israel to atone for its sins. The Qumran community didn't see this as a fulfilled prophecy. They saw it as the master timeline for all of history, and they believed they were living at its absolute end. Their writings are filled with a sense of urgency. They describe their own time as the age of wrath, a final period of wickedness before the end. They analyzed current events, the Roman occupation, the corrupt priesthood, and saw them as the fulfillment of ancient prophecies. They believed the clock had nearly run out. In one text, they calculate a period of about 40 years would pass between the death of their founding leader, the teacher of righteousness, and the final destruction of all evil. This created a state of constant expectation. They lived every day as if it could be the last. So what happened when the expected dates passed and the final war didn't start? The scrolls suggest they didn't lose faith. Instead, they believed the timeline could be extended, that God was further testing their resolve. The final countdown had begun, but the ultimate moment of God's visitation, the divine intervention that would trigger the war, was still to come. They remained ever watchful, a patient army in the desert, waiting for the call to war. The dust of the Judean desert has long since settled. The Qumran community vanished from history, likely wiped out during the very war with the Romans they had so long prepared for. But their legacy, preserved in these fragile scrolls, endures. What they left behind is a profound testament to the power of belief. The Dead Sea Scrolls, especially the War Scroll, show us that for the Sons of Light, the end of time was not some abstract idea. It was a real, imminent event for which they had a detailed, strategic plan. They envisioned a 40-year struggle that would engulf the world, a cosmic war pitting their righteous community and angelic allies against a demonic army led by Bel. This war would be led by priestly and royal messiahs, and would unfold according to a divine timetable they believed was rapidly nearing its end. 2,000 years later, these scrolls challenge us. They force us to look back into a world where faith was so intense that it produced a literal blueprint for Armageddon. The story of the War Scroll is the story of a community that lived on the knife's edge of history, utterly convinced they were the generation that would witness the final judgment. And it leaves us with a final question. Was the War Scroll a literal blueprint for a future they truly expected to fight? Was it a grand allegory for the eternal struggle between good and evil that exists in every human soul? Or was it a desperate hope for divine justice, forged in an age of oppression? What do you think this incredible, terrifying document truly represents? If you want to continue exploring the greatest mysteries of history and faith, make sure to subscribe and check out our other videos, like the one on screen now. Thank you for watching.